Tonight, Pakistan tells Sky News it's ready for all-out war with nuclear rival India if Delhi launches an attack. Amid the fallout from this week's terror attack in Kashmir, the Defence Minister in Islamabad tells me tensions are escalating and that the world should be worried.
If there is an all-out, attack or something like that, then obviously there will be an all-out war.
Also tonight, President Trump urges Putin to stop the bombs after one of the deadliest attacks on Kiev in months. 12 people were killed in Ukraine's capital and dozens more injured across several cities in a wide-ranging attack. Will President Trump's direct appeal to President Putin work or fall on deaf ears? Today we found Russian politicians emboldened.
If we were to liken the talks to a game of chess, would you say it's now checkmate to Russia?
No, of course it's not checkmate. We are winning, but the situation is complicated.
Also ahead, our Asia correspondent reports from the Gobi Desert with rare access to a Chinese mission looking to reignite the space race.
The force of that is just immense. Even from out here, all this way, we can really feel it.
Good evening. There's lots we want to discuss tonight, including the latest on Ukraine after one of the deadliest nights for Kiev in the past year. But I want to start with the growing tensions between India and Pakistan and the increasing chances of an escalation between two nuclear powers with major geopolitical consequences. Now, in an interview we're going to bring you shortly, Pakistan's defence minister tells me his country is now preparing the possibility of all-out war. His rhetoric is the result of a growing diplomatic row between Delhi and Islamabad. Have a listen.
There's a possibility that there is a outbreak of all-out war, which will have serious repercussions not only for our region, for our countries, but rest of the world also.
This new flashpoint was sparked by a terror attack in India-controlled Kashmir that left 26 people dead. In the aftermath, India hit Pakistan with a raft of measures, indicating where it felt the blame lied. But Pakistan denied any involvement. Now, Kashmir has long been a flashpoint in long-running tensions. Both India and Pakistan claim the region in full, but control is ultimately split between them. It remains one of the most militarised zones in the world. The two powers agreed the original ceasefire border as the line of control. Well, today, India's Prime Minister threatened to pursue and punish those responsible for the terror attack to the ends of the earth. For years, he's accused Pakistan of harbouring terrorists. Now, it seems Pakistan is expecting a direct attack from Delhi, and that, the Defence Minister told me, would bring us to all-out war. We'll hear his words in a moment, but first, here's some more context. Our India reporter Neville Lazarus went to the scene of this week's terror attack in Kashmir earlier today. Here's his report.
It's a crime scene that could have global consequences. Families were enjoying their holidays in an off-road meadow in Pahalgam, known as Mini Switzerland, when militants opened fire, killing 26 and injuring dozens. Security forces are still searching for clues. There is investigation still taking place, and we have been asked to clear out the place, clear out this location because of the investigations. Soldiers have fanned out across the region in pursuit of the gunmen who have fled into the forests and mountains. The terrain posing a major challenge to search operations.
India will identify, track and punish every terrorist. We will pursue them to the ends of the earth.
India has escalated the diplomatic offensive, revoking visas, expelling military advisors, and putting on hold the Indus Water Treaty. Pakistan retaliated. Prime Minister Sharif called a meeting of the National Security Committee and passed reciprocal measures, and held the suspension of the water treaty would be considered an act of war.
We are fully prepared. If anyone tries to attempt any action, and they've tried it in the past as well, this time around it will be even worse for them.
In the capital, Islamabad, there were demonstrations against India. They mourn at the home of Saeed Shah and offer prayers for 30-year-old Adil. He was working at the meadow when the gunman attacked. He challenged one and tried to grab his gun, giving time for some of the tourists to escape, but paid with his life.
He tried to save the lives of people, be it Hindus or anyone, and I am proud of what he did. But I am sad that he lost his life. It's like a part of me has been cut off, and I feel such pain, but I'm also proud.
Kashmir is the crown over which the two nuclear-armed neighbours have fought wars. And with such hostility and mistrust, there is every chance of an escalation that could be devastating to its people. Neville Lazarus, Sky News in Pahalgam, Kashmir.
Well, as we heard there in Neville's report, tensions have escalated over the past 48 hours, and that's something I put to the Minister of Defence of Pakistan, Khwaja Asif. He conceded Pakistan had funded terror organisations in the past, but said that was a mistake. He now issued a warning that the world should be worried by the threat of all-out war, and even suggested Donald Trump may have a role to play in de-escalating the row. All that to come, but first, here's his take on the terror attack.
The reaction which came from Delhi was not really surprising for us. We could make out that this whole thing was staged to create some sort of crisis in the region, particularly for us.
I'm just going to have to pick you up on that. When you say staged, what do you mean?
I personally and our government also in the last 2 days, we have condemned it categorically, without any reservation, that terrorism in all its forms is something which should be condemned as strongly as possible. This is something Pakistan has been victim of terrorism for decades, and perhaps no other country in the world has suffered so much from terrorism as Pakistan because of the wars in Afghanistan in the 80s, and then in the previous decade and decade before that. So we are very familiar the pain it inflicts on the people in the country and the nation when we are subjected to terrorism. But this sort of pattern which is going on in India, when President Clinton was there, there was a terrorist attack on Sikhs. 40 or 44 died in that, and it was blamed that some never heard of that organization which orchestrated this whole terrorist attack. This time again, the people who are being accused are not known, never heard of the organization.
You're talking about an offshoot of Lashkar-e-Taiba, the resistance.
Lashkar-e-Taiba, let me tell you, Lashkar-e-Taiba is a name from the past. It is totally defunct. It does not exist. Let me tell you,
this organization, this group, the Resistance Front, is believed to be an offshoot of Lashkar-e-Taiba. But I just want to take you back to the point that you made a little earlier, sir, where you talked about, rightly, that Pakistan has been a victim of terrorism for decades. As you know, and as the world knows, that is correct. But the reason that India is pointing the blame on Pakistan is because Pakistan is also known to back, harbour, train and fund these terrorist organisations, namely the Taliban for years and groups like Lashkar-e-Taiba. So this is one of the reasons why the Trump administration in 2018 prevented any military aid from reaching Pakistan, because they said that Pakistan was continuing to play a double game. So this is one of the reasons why India has done this today. While you might not be overtly involved, the fact is that because of the ISIs, your intelligence agencies' backing of these terrorist organizations, that is why the finger of blame is now being pointed on Pakistan.
It is very convenient for the big powers to blame Pakistan for whatever is happening in this region. When we were fighting the war on their side in way back in the 80s against Soviet Union, all these terrorists of today, they were whining and dining in Washington. And then came the 9/11 attacks. Again, the same situation was repeated. I think our governments then made a mistake.
When you say you made a mistake, do you mean in backing and supporting terrorist organizations and using them as proxies?
No, they were being used as proxy by United States also. They were actually these Talibans, or before that, the people who were who visited Washington, and they were very treated like VIPs in those days. They're all mixed up. They're not multiple organizations. They're just one single organization, religiously organized, and with different faces, different leadership. At times they work together, at times they fight with each other. So it's a long discussion. I don't want to get into that.
But just to talk about the incident in Kashmir, sir, India is pointing the finger of blame at Pakistan. They do say that they will retaliate. Are you concerned that retaliation will be in the form of airstrikes, which could escalate?
This has happened before also, Pulwama, which will later prove to be a false flag operation. And it was confirmed by the Indian media and Indian sources that it was a false flag operation. Pakistan had nothing to do with Pulwama. There was an air raid.
That this incident was, when you say false flag,
let me complete my sentence, and then you can ask me anything you want. And later on, when they attacked Pakistan after Pulwama, we downed their fighter, and ultimately we, as a goodwill gesture, we returned the pilot to them. And the things ultimately, cooled down. This time again, they are repeating the same thing. An incident took place in occupied Kashmir, and they are blaming us for that. And our media has never heard the organization they are mentioning behind this attack in Kashmir day before yesterday.
Are you worried?
No, we are not worried. If it comes to a fight, if India attacks us, we'll retaliate in kind. There's absolutely no doubt in our minds. It has happened before.
Just to be clear, sir, when you say false flag, when you say staged, are you blaming India for this attack that took place in Kashmir?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. They create these situations.
What evidence are you?
Let me just take 30 seconds. Are you aware of Modi's history, what he did in Gujarat when he was Chief Minister of Gujarat? He killed 2,200.
Yes, we are, and we've interrogated that. I don't want to go into the history of Prime Minister Modi, but what I want to do is focus on this situation.
The present from history.
The reason India is blaming Pakistan is because they believe, and the United States has long believed, and that was one of the reasons why they pulled military funding from your country, is because Pakistan, its intelligence agencies, fund and back these terrorist organizations. That's why they're blaming you. You are now saying that this was staged by India based on what evidence?
They never came up for any evidence for these incidents in Kashmir. Any evidence. Till now, they have in the last 10, 15 years, 3-4 incidents have taken place, but they never came up with any evidence. Just to blame Pakistan for something and create a situation for their own advantage. That doesn't mean that Pakistan is because Lashkar-e-Taiba in the past had some linkages in Pakistan. That doesn't mean that
what evidence do you now have that India staged this? Because
we have nothing to do with we have nothing to. There is no Lashkar-e-Taiba does not exist in Pakistan anymore. It is extinct. It is extinct. How can it
this is an offshoot known, and they have claimed responsibility. The resistance front.
But my dear, if the parent organization does not exist, how can the offshoot take birth?
Well, that's what you say. That's what you say. The Indians, their intelligence agencies, the United States is often pointed the finger
our intelligence agencies, they say otherwise. They said it's all staged. It was staged in Pulwama also, and we were proved correct then. And India did not pursue that after the air attack, and their plane was downed, and we returned there. The things cooled down then, and now again the same thing is.
You do admit, sir, that Pakistan has had a long history of backing and supporting and training and funding these terrorist organizations.
Well, we have been doing this dirty work for the United States for about 3 decades, and West, including Britain.
So that's your argument that even though
that was a mistake, and we suffered for that. And that is why you are saying this to me. If we had not joined the war against Soviet Union and later on the war after 9/11, this Pakistan's track record, was not, unimpeachable track record.
Defence Minister, I just want to get back to this particular incident in Kashmir and the noises that are now coming out of Delhi. Do you believe this situation is going to escalate and that India will launch airstrikes? Is Pakistan preparing itself for that?
We are already prepared for it, We are already prepared for it. Any eventuality which takes place in next 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 days or week or 10 days, we'll retaliate and we'll react to that, in kind, inshallah.
How will you respond if India does launch a series of airstrikes?
We will measure our response to whatever is initiated by India according to that. It would be a measured response. If there is an all-out, attack or something like that, then obviously there will be an all-out war. And if it is something...
And that's what I wanted to get to. We're talking about 2 nuclear powers. Should the world be worried about this moment?
Yes, I think so. The clash between 2 nuclear powers is always worrisome.
Are you expecting then all-out war? And how do you think the world should react and respond?
I think the world, the attitude which has been adopted by India over the years repeatedly, especially since the takeover by BJP, the power in Delhi, these things are taking place with quite frequency, So this is something which world should be, focusing at, because there are 2 nuclear powers in the subcontinent. And if things get wrong, there could be a tragic outcome of this confrontation.
What message do you have to Delhi?
If I have to give them a message, is that we are neighbours. We have problems. We have some very serious problems with each other, especially over Kashmir. But we should be solving our problems through negotiations. We have had negotiations in the past, but we don't have those negotiations mechanism anymore between our 2 countries. That they have abandoned the treaty which was negotiated way back in 1960 by the World Bank. This Sindh Water, Accord. So they have abandoned that, which is a very serious breakdown between the 2 countries. The relation between the 2 countries is a serious breakdown. It is underwritten by the World Bank. This treaty, they cannot abandon this treaty just like that. This is a serious blow to the relationship between the two countries. I think India should not be resorting to such measures. This will escalate the situation, and there's a possibility that there is a outbreak of all-out war, which will have serious repercussions not only for our region, for our countries, but rest of the world also.
And what
we
message?
We should refrain from that. We should take measures to stop any situation from flaring up to a level which will be irreversible.
And what message do you have to Donald Trump? Does he have a role to play in this and the United States?
Definitely, he leads the world power, the sole world power, and he has been talking to different parties in different flashpoints all over the world. And this is also a flashpoint in this, which has two nuclear powers daggers drawn with each other. I think the attention of the world should be drawn to this this situation. And if the world power can intervene and there's some sort of sanity can be brought to this situation, it will be good. Otherwise, if there is an initiative by India, we'll respond in kind. We will not have any option. Have absolutely no option.
That was Pakistan's Defence Minister Khwaja Asif speaking to me a little earlier. Well, you're watching The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Still to come on the programme, Vladimir stop, Trump's message to Putin after a deadly strike in Kiev, as the US president insists a peace deal can still be done.
Show of military might and menace. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Have a quick word for Sky News. Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine? American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display. I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's futures.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away. So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
Do jubilation in the streets, while some emotional. This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
Welcome back. Well, President Trump has once again insisted a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine is possible, adding he has no allegiance to anybody. Speaking in the Oval Office this evening, the US president failed to outline the details, but did say he was putting a lot of pressure on Russia, striking a similar tone to his Truth Social post earlier, which simply read, "Vladimir, stop." This all in response to one of the deadliest airstrikes on the Ukrainian capital in the last year, with at least 12 people confirmed to have died and dozens more left injured. And while Trump may be pleading with Putin to stop, our Moscow correspondent Ivor Bennett spoke to Russian politicians today who feel emboldened by the state of the war.
Russia says it's ready for peace, but it has a unique way of showing it. The scale of the attack on Kyiv still brutally clear, even on a laptop. This was the deadliest strike on the Ukrainian capital since last summer. Some were rescued from the rubble, but others were buried, along with, it seems, hopes of a diplomatic breakthrough.
I don't believe in peace, because these Shahed drones are definitely not peaceful, and nor are the missiles that are killing us.
Ukraine's president was in South Africa, seeking more international support. But he knows the only support that really matters right now is from Washington.
We believe that with more pressure on the Russian Federation, we will be able to bring our parties closer. In diplomatic language, we will be able to get closer to a complete, unconditional ceasefire.
From Donald Trump, it did provoke some criticism of Vladimir Putin.
I wasn't happy with it, and we're in the midst of talking peace, and missiles were fired, and I was not happy with it. Mr. Prime Minister said,
but that was it. The pressure is still on Ukraine to accept a peace deal that includes ceding claim to Crimea.
That had nothing to do with me, Crimea. That was 11 years ago with Obama. And they made a decision. There wasn't a bullet fired. There was no fighting. There was no anything. They just handed it over. Now they say, well, can you get it back? I think that's going to be a very difficult thing to do.
Russia's senator in Crimea is a chess grandmaster. So is this checkmate to Moscow?
No, of course, it's not checkmate. We are winning, but the situation is complicated, of course, and of course we are not happy basically about the situation, but anyway we hope that we'll find a solution from this, and we have to keep going.
Ever since Donald Trump threatened to walk away from the peace talks, it feels like the Kremlin's been falling over itself to try and show a willingness to make progress. There was the Easter ceasefire, for example, and an offer to hold direct talks with Ukraine. But in reality, Russia is yet to make any concrete concessions. The only thing that's really changed, it seems, is America's position, which has shifted even further in favour of Moscow. Donald Trump claims a peace deal's still afloat, but that depends from where you view things. Ivor Bennett, Sky News, Moscow.
Last night's attacks have been viewed as some of the most wide-ranging in the past year. Our security and defence analyst Michael Clark has the latest for us on what's happening on the ground in Ukraine.
The Russians have mounted many extensive air attacks on Ukraine over the recent months, but last night's was one of the biggest ever. According to the Ukrainians, there were 70 different missiles used and about 145 drones in strikes that went right across the country, from the west to the south to the north. The Russians said today that they launched massive airstrikes against the military-industrial complex of Ukraine. But evidence from some areas, particularly in Kyiv, is not quite that. What we can see from Kyiv is that a lot of these air attacks hit civilian areas, killed a fair few people, and did a great deal of damage and injured many more people. That sort of destruction has shocked many leaders in the West, and even Donald Trump has put on Truth Social today, his media platform, the fact he said, "I'm not happy. This is not necessary. This is very bad timing." He said to the Russians, "Vladimir, you must stop this." Well, he has to say something because these attacks, I think, have shocked so many people. But I think President Trump's attitude is probably more summed up by the posting he made last night, about 24 hours ago, in which he said that he blames Zelensky for asserting the sovereign right of Ukraine to hang on to Crimea. And Crimea is a problem. The Crimea Peninsula is something of an anomaly, but it is legally part of Ukraine. And although Zelensky may privately agree that it's very unlikely that the Ukrainians in the short or medium term would ever get Crimea back, he's not going to give up sovereign claim to it any more than any other country would give up sovereign claim to territory that is part of its intrinsic legal territory. So that's where we are with the Trump attitude. He really doesn't like Zelensky. He really is using this sovereignty of Ukraine argument as an example of the fact that I think that Zelensky is standing in the way of peace. It seems to me to be increasingly giving us the sense that there is a difference between what is happening on the ground in Ukraine and what is happening in these rarefied politics between Washington and Moscow and, in some respects, London as well. And that discrepancy between what's happening on the ground and what is happening politically looks as if it's about to reach some sort of breaking point in the next few days or maybe 2 weeks at the most.
Professor Michael Clark, let's go straight to our David Blevins, who joins us from Washington. And David, as always, I mean, there's always so much going on in Donald Trump's Washington. And today, we know he met with the Norwegian Prime Minister. In the last couple of days, he's been speaking a lot about the war in Ukraine, taking a swipe at Zelensky. Today, telling Vladimir Putin to stop and saying he's annoyed about the fact that the airstrikes have continued. Some of the deadliest moments in the past year took place in the last 24 hours. I mean, I guess, you know, in many ways, none of these things are quite new. We've seen him have that row with Zelensky. We've seen him attack Vladimir Putin in the past. What is new that's come out from today's discussions in the last 24 hours?
Well, that's a very good question, Yalda. Another day, another world leader in the Oval Office, another lengthy briefing by the President of the United States. But I think we did learn a few new things, notably that he would regard Russia not taking all of Ukraine as a concession. That's the word he used. That he appears to have some understanding of the fact that his approach to Ukraine is causing concern, because he told reporters he was putting pressure on Russia, and that if he wasn't doing so, Putin would not be talking. And that he also does appear to have a deadline in focus. When asked if he thought there would be a breakthrough, he said, yes, I think there will be a deal, but ask me again next week. I think it's worth noting that next week marks his 100th day in office, and that will be a day when his presidency comes under intense scrutiny. So it's also going to be a day when he'll be desperate for some good news. So it does indeed appear that he's trying very hard, along with his team, to get some sort of a deal across the line by early next week.
Yeah, I mean, David, I guess it begs the question, you know, he's threatened, he's tried to push the Ukrainians especially to make concessions. His Secretary of State has said, listen, if there's no deal, we're going to move on. J.D. Vance said the same thing in India yesterday. But what is this deal that they're asking for? Because it seems like the entirety of their pressure and focus is on the Ukrainians at the moment, to give land up, to you know, accept that they won't be part of NATO, even though he then says things like, you know, Vladimir Putin, you need to stop what you're doing.
It's very hard to find the strategy because it changes from day to day, it would seem. Yesterday, he said that he had no favourites. Today, he said he had no allegiances. But if that's the case, then there are a couple of questions. Why does he speak so differently about Putin than he does about Zelensky? For example, that post online this morning, Vladimir, stop. I can't remember him ever addressing Zelensky by his first name. It was very very personal in tone, and also it felt more like pleading than criticising Russia for the attack in Kyiv overnight. And then the other question would be, if he really makes no difference between a country that's been invaded and the country that's done the invading, why does the US peace plan, so heavily leaked, propose the US recognising Crimea as part of Russia? Because that places Zelensky and indeed his European allies in an impossible situation. It effectively legitimises the war, and it goes further than that. It sets Zelensky up to be the fall guy if they don't get a deal over the line in the next week.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, no doubt we'll be speaking again very soon. David, thanks so much for bringing us up to date. Well, today the UK government said it stood by Ukraine over Crimea. It comes as US support on that issue appears to be wavering. Let's bring in our chief political correspondent, John Craig, who joins me here in the studio. So we got the view there, John, from the United States, Donald Trump flipping and flopping on the issue and not really showing support when it comes to Crimea, especially saying, you know what, you haven't managed to retain the land that you have, and it's going to be hard for you to get Crimea back. And I guess, what's the government's position here?
The government's position, two strong messages from the British government today. From the Prime Minister, first of all, hey, let's not forget who the aggressor here is. It's Russia. And secondly, a hands-off Crimea warning. That came from a Foreign Office minister in the House of Commons, completely contradicting what the Americans are saying about recognising Russian claims to what's been described as illegally occupied territory, including Crimea. That came from Stephen Doughty in the House of Commons. There was an urgent question from the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Priti Patel, and Mr. Doughty was responding. Well, the Prime Minister, first of all, said really in what was seen by some as a thinly veiled or perhaps a more heavily veiled swipe at President Trump, had this to say about who the real aggressor is here.
I think it's a real reminder that Russia is the aggressor here, and that is being felt by the Ukrainians as it's been felt for 3 long years now, and that's why it's important that we get Russia to an unconditional ceasefire. Obviously, we had talks in London this week, in Paris last week. We're making progress towards a ceasefire. It's got to be a lasting ceasefire, but these attacks, which are just awful, attacks, are a real human reminder of who is the aggressor here.
You know, when we hear Keir Starmer, it is clear that Britain's position and Europe's position hasn't really shifted or changed. They want to show that they stand by Ukraine, especially on the issue of Crimea, because that would then mean, you know, where do they draw the lines? Is it the 2022 borders? Is it the 2014 borders? And certainly Ukraine says that's a red line for them. And Britain says, look, we support you on that.
Well, first of all, on Britain and Europe, today the Prime Minister was meeting Ursula von der Leyen. They were at an energy summit and then they had talks in Downing Street. And according to the number 10 account of the meeting, they said they condemned this overnight strike and reiterate they will continue to stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes. Now, on Crimea, it was Stephen Doughty answering questions from MPs in Parliament who said, he talked about our position's not changed. We do not recognise Russian sovereignty over any territory illegally seized from Ukraine, including Crimea. And so the number 10 he also went on to say, as number 10 did, President Zelensky has shown his commitment to peace. In the House of Commons, there was some frustration from Tories, senior Tories actually, including a former Foreign Secretary James Cleverly, about the shift in position from the United States. And Kemi Badenoch today talked about how President Zelensky is a hero. We need to do everything we can to support Ukraine to end the war. And she called on the Prime Minister to do everything he can to rebuild the relationship between President Trump and President Zelensky.
Yeah, a big task ahead. John, thank you so much for bringing us up to date. Well, this is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up on the programme, liftoff. 3 Chinese astronauts are on their way to the country's Tiangong space station after a successful rocket launch.
telling us that they want aid.
This is what's left of it.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
Just want to jump in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. China has successfully launched 3 takonauts into space, and it's set to be the next step towards a possible mission to the moon and exploration of Mars. The trio are set to replace the crew who've been in orbit on the country's space station for the last 6 months. It's the 20th launch since the Chinese space program started 3 decades ago. Sky's Asia correspondent Helen Ann Smith was given access to the launch and sent us this report.
In the Gobi Desert, they were ready. China's space program surging forward.
Wow, the force of that is just immense. Even from out here, all this way, we can really feel it reverberating through your body. There's a real sense of how China wants to show us, to my extent, and the rest of the world, what it can do.
The 3 taikonauts aboard en route to China's space station, a routine rotation underpinned by much broader ambition. Just a few hours earlier, crowds gathered to wave them off. 3 men who are heroes here. Indeed, this whole event has been lined with pure and unashamed pride. Space, a nationalistic endeavour.
Yes, China #1.
And just listen to the crew's commander. This is not about him, but his country.
Carrying with us the blessings of our country and people, a firm determination to accomplish our mission, the desire to re-enter space and the support of our teammates, we will courageously journey forward into the vast universe.
They won't say it out loud, but everyone here knows the context. An escalating global standoff with America, a superpower race for results.
Are you optimistic that it will be China, the next country to put a man on the moon?
We are now in the middle of the intense development towards the manned lunar landing. We are going to achieve our goal according to our plan.
Indeed, China's space station is a symbol of its surging success. It has also landed a rover on Mars, and it is the first country to have returned samples from the far side of the moon. And its ambitions are broader still. China has Mars in its sights, simulated here in the Gobi Desert.
This is more like outside the Mars environment.
Mars landscape.
And this is where astronauts will live in this Mars base.
This centre for students and tourists imagines how a Mars base could be. China does want to be the first to harvest and return samples, a truly groundbreaking feat.
As a Chinese person, I would be very proud. There is no doubt. But what's more important is no matter who brings the sample back, it will promote the scientific and technological development of mankind.
But experts say space is rarely just a scientific endeavour, and China is thinking long-term.
As space is getting increasingly more accessible, more satellites being put up there, that also enhances the military and defence capabilities of nation states.
That is why the US is watching China closely. It may still have the lead in space, but China is closing the gap. Helen Ann Smith, Sky News, in Zhochuan, northern China.
This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up, the untold stories of young lives uprooted by conflict in Ukraine. We'll speak to the woman behind an eye-opening new documentary.
Over there, to your left. There have been airstrikes every day. Hezbollah are very sensitive about us showing any pictures, and we're being hurried away right now.
It felt akin to riding into some sort of Armageddon.
Many other areas have been hit badly. There are shells coming in every few minutes. Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city, where there's a column of Russian armoury. I'm Alex Crawford, and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul. It's trying to hit us. That's it. It got us then. There's a lot of action going on. A lot of hits.
still. We were the first journalists and the only outsiders to reach the site of the attack several weeks after it happened.
We found from the missile.
It's very difficult to see what around here could be conceived of as a legitimate military target. Only about half a mile from the Turkish coast, a boat seriously overcrowded. This is one of the most severe viruses in the world.
Clearly not had very much to eat at all, a lot of them extremely thin and very frail. Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.
The world's largest falls now down to a trickle in places.
I can't imagine how much plastic is lying at the bottom of this huge lake. Whoa!
Getting up close and personal with a rhino.
This is what makes the job so fantastic.
The Premier League Run-In is live exclusively on Peacock. Catch your breath. Sunday, a strike towards Premier League history is in sight, with Liverpool on the edge of a second Premier League title. Full of tension, full of jeopardy, full of goals. Spurs look to thwart their trophy hopes. Everything magnified. This is the Premier League Run-In, live exclusively on Peacock.
A show of military might and menace. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Sky News. Get the full story first.
Have a quick word for Sky News.
Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine? American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display. I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war.
This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's futures.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away. So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
Returning to the war in Ukraine now, but a slightly different side of the conflict, and that's the impact on children and families who have been forced to flee their homes and leave everything they know behind. Well, that's something which has inspired a new documentary narrated by Stephen Fry and explores the raw, rarely seen experiences of children uprooted by war. Have a listen.
At the very moment the first explosion sounds, the windows will rattle and you'll hear an air raid alarm. You won't be able to explain to the child why this bright, charming world suddenly turned into the scariest nightmare from which one may not wake up.
Well, I'm pleased to say the producer of that documentary, Kaylee Page-Rees, joins me here in the studio. Kaylee, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, I was watching the promo and it's so incredibly moving because how could we forget those images of women, children separated from their husbands, their fathers, their brothers, especially on those train platforms. I remember the women were getting on the trains to go to Poland and the men were having to stay behind because of the conflict.
Absolutely, and I think that at the heart of it, it was trying to remember the human level of it, that actually what the documentary really looks at is what children and families are still living through who are devastated by the war, in terms of what families feel like they want the future to look for their children, and maybe that they feel like they're not quite aware of the war or what's going on. And then it was incredible speaking to these resilient children who had an incredible grasp on what the war was and what happened in their lives. And at this point, this was kind of 18 months into the war. Now looking at it 3 years on, we kind of went back to show the documentary to those families and children, and their understanding of what had gone on and their resilience was just incredible. And that's what this is. It's ultimately an hour documentary that just shows you the resilience and hopefully the future of the country and what they've been through.
And I guess it's a reminder that no one has a monopoly on freedom, because these children, you see the beginnings of their lives and the freedom that they had, and then just like that,
Yeah.
The last 3 years has been nothing but devastation and bombings and displacement, internally displaced, and also becoming refugees in other countries.
Yes, completely. And a lot of it, in terms of who we spoke to, a lot of who we spoke to was families who had chosen to stay in different parts of Ukraine because they felt that that was home. You know, we are home, that's kind of the title of the project. And it was really looking at those children who had been through it and them trying to explain what they'd been through and what their future looked like now, kind of in a completely different element of their life that no one would have been able to describe or explain to them. And it was just heartbreaking, but it leaves you with a profound effect of what these children can go through and the resilience that they can still have. It was heartbreaking and inspiring in so many ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Kaylee, was there a story, I mean, I'm sure there were many, that really stood out for you that sort of made you pause and you were moved by?
Yeah, there were a lot of stories that we couldn't actually put onto the documentary just in terms of being so emotional that after the fact, those involved didn't necessarily want that story to be out, things that they'd seen, not just in terms of the devastation of their homes, but torture and things that they'd been through with people in the ground, especially in Kyiv and Kharkiv, and sitting through that and having those conversations with people and the trust that people had. I felt that immensely when I went over there. I didn't want anyone to feel like we were trying to take their stories from them or kind of have an opinion or put a side on their stories, and just how open and honest they were was truly just left me kind of...
Yeah, I mean, I've made documentaries, and you realise the privilege you get to be allowed into people's homes and into their lives.
Absolutely.
How do you want people to remember these children, the families, and what they have been through and continue to go through?
Ultimately, they're the future of the country. So I think what I would like people to do is take an hour to look at their lives, look at children who are living in abandoned kind of schools or who are converted classrooms and are learning to walk in a school or learning to live their lives completely differently, and see that actually they are the future and they're the ones who are going to be walking in the footsteps that lead that country. And hopefully people can walk away and just see a different light of the war, see actually what children, families, innocent lives are going through.
Kaylee, we have about a minute left, but there's a lot of talk around peace deals, truce, you know, ceasefires. Do the people of Ukraine and the people that you're talking to, these families, have any hope of a better future?
I spoke to the director of the documentary today, who's called Anton, and he lives in Kyiv, and his opinions on kind of the peace deal and things like that. And from his perspective, he feels, especially with the attacks that happened last night, that we're not really anywhere near peace talks in his mind, but that maybe what's going on with these conversations are pushing Putin to actually have to have some conversation around it, which is more than has happened in those 3 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was his opinion.
Yeah, well, Kaylee, I'm so grateful that you've joined us here on the programme, and thank you for the work that you've done.
Thank you so much.
That was Kaylee Page-Rees talking about her new documentary, which has dropped on Apple TV. It's called We Are Home. Well, that's it from me and the team. Thank you so much for watching. And if you've missed our interview with Pakistan's Defence Minister threatening all-out war over Kashmir, you can watch that back on the Sky News app and in full on YouTube. Goodbye for now. Thank you so much, Haley. Really enjoyed it.